What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from SBMTG, and this is the first in our series of the State of Standard. This is where we take a look at 5 decks currently shaping the standard metagame and kind of tell you what you're going to have to expect when you come up against some of these things. This is for, if you're trying to maybe train for an Open or even a Grand Prix, or if you're just, trying to put something together for F&M, then these are the top 5 decks in Standard right this darn second, and that's kind of important to know, right? Yeah, totally. Don't be fooled. BlueEyed Heroic can win entire tournaments on its own. It's no slouch, and it's good for players on a budget. So, the aforementioned F&M player looking for a great deck on a budget, this thing is a lot of fun. Just to even Goldfish, it's one of those decks. I mean, all of your guys get bigger when you target them with the spells, and the spells make your guys bigger, and they scry, and they draw your cards, and you draw more and more cards. Some of the enchantments make your guys bigger. Everything makes your guys bigger all the time. And, I don't know, nothing costs more than 2 mana, so the deck is just like blindingly fast and wins out of nowhere, and, you start off with a 1/1 Hoplite, and he becomes, 8/8 before the third turn. It's ridiculous. So this is a fun deck, and it only costs like $25 to build, and it's the easiest mana base right now in the format. It does have issues, though. Your biggest problems are probably seeing a Siege Rhino hit the table or sitting down across the table from a dedicated control deck. You've got things against that. You've got a Johnny's Presence and you've got God's Willing. But for the most part, control just runs so many, 16 removal options, and control is a big problem. As is Abzan. Abzan is a big problem too, just because it can take over the game in the mid game, especially once it plays Siege Rhino, and you're gonna have a bad day. It can ruin your day. It's having problems a little bit with the heavy hitters in the format. I'm gonna give BlueEyed Heroic a baseline score of about 3.5. It's a pretty good deck. It's relatively stable, but it just has trouble hanging with some of the big money decks in the format currently. So 3.5 for BlueEyed Heroic. A little aggro that could. It's been around since the beginning of the season, and it's taken a lot of different forms, whether it, the red-white version, and some of those use, more Seeker of the Ways than Soulfire Grandmasters. Some of them use Monastery Mentor instead of Goblin Rabblemaster. The Jeskai version drops like God's Willing and Titan Strength and a couple of creatures and puts like Treasure Cruise and Jeskai Ascendancy in, so it can just go crazy and draw cards all the time and generate advantage. So there's a few different versions of this deck, but they all just generate like obscene amounts of tokens early on in the game, and just kind of go from there, And again, it plays differently than it used to. I'd say it used to play a lot of Dig Through Time and Manus Rider, but it's not as important anymore to play Manus Rider, really. And Jeskai Ascendancy is not something you have to do on the 3rd turn, where Manus Rider sort of felt like the deck was built to play that card on the 3rd turn, and it's not as necessary anymore. That's why we see more red-white incarnations of it than we used to. However, its weaknesses are there. Its weaknesses are the same as BlueEyed Heroic, honestly, except sort of flipped. It does a little better against control than Heroic does, but it does far worse against Abzan in a lot of cases than Heroic does. Heroic has decent game against Abzan. Once Siege Rhino's out, you're in a lot of trouble in a lot of cases. The Ascendancy version does a little better against that because it can much more easily draw into answers. But the red-white version is, not even arguably, much faster than the Ascendancy version, and if you're looking for raw speed, either version is very good, but red-white is better for speed, and just serious card advantage is the Jeskai's sort of forte. The whole reason that the deck actually runs like a mid-range sideboard is probably Abzan, just because Siege Rhino wrecks its day so hard. Not to mention it has to answer Courser and Arbor Colossus and some of the other stuff that Zan is packing these days. And although it does make, like I said, just a ridiculous, scandalous, off-the-wall amount of creatures within 3 or 4 turns, it does falter against some of the giants of the format, and that earns it a 3.75 score in this case. It is slightly more consistent than its Azorius cousin, Blue-Eyed Heroic, but not quite on the level with some of these other things at the end of the day. So, yeah. Every format needs a ramp deck. This format is no different. This one is a lot more fun than a lot of the ramp decks we've seen in recent formats. It starts with the usual suspects. You got your Mystic and your Courser and your Caryatid, your Voyaging Satyr and your Nykthos, you know, all of that stuff. But it leads up to this, just the most feel-good suit of creatures that ramp has played in a really long time. You've got like the Wheel of Friendship, Genesis Hydra. You've got the friggin' pentagonal death touch flying thing of death, the Hornet Queen, which is one of the best cards in the entire format. It really wrecks Abzan's day. It hurts control upon resolution if you can get that to happen. Hornet Queen is just bonkers. Arbor Colossus is crazy. It plays Belukronos. So just every ridiculous creature, this deck pretty much plays it. There's a green-red version that plays Storm Breath and Xenagos just to get your huge guys out there even faster. I've seen versions that play the, I think it's Soul of Zendikar from the core set. There's a lot of different stuff that you can do with this ramp deck. And ramp decks are always a whole lot of fun. And the problem with this one specifically is it has issues with aggro. A lot of ramp decks tend to, because by the time you get set up, aggro is almost ready to alpha strike. Aggro is really fast in this format, really fast. And ramp usually can stabilize, but this one has an issue in that like all of its cards can't be out for, you know, they give you immediate advantage, but they have to be out for a turn before they, you know, you can't just end the game immediately in most cases with this ramp deck. And if they're in a situation where they can alpha strike, they'll just, you know, use their 15 tokens and go straight through your Genesis Hydra and your other guy that you got with the Hydra. So yeah, it also, it struggles to kind of gain ground against control, which just handily, it counters and removes things like crazy. This current control plays a lot of counter magic and oodles of removals. So it struggles if it doesn't just outright win immediately against aggro. The game goes long at all, or against control. If the game goes long at all, control gains favor pretty quickly. But it does so well against just the all-star in the format Abzan that it's a viable deck strategy because you're going to see a lot of Abzan. And for ramp players, it's a lot of fun to beat up on Siege Rhino. For Siege Rhino to like not even matter is pretty cool. If you hate Siege Rhino, then try and play this deck because it's still going to be a thing when it's on the board, but you have way more trumps. Just the sheer amount of speed and threats that this deck plays helps to trump Abzan pretty easily. So in the paper, rock, scissors game, it's got sort of decent game against aggro. It falters against control if the game goes long at all, and it really ruins Abzan's day. I mean, it does not an auto win against Abzan, but it's very strong compared to other decks against that deck. So kind of a push-pull on that one. And it does have a weak sideboard is the last point against it, I would say. It adds more removal against aggro, but it doesn't necessarily get all the way there. You know, it doesn't really narrow the gap enough. But, yeah, lots of threats, decent speed. I'll give the deck a 4.25 right now. It's right in the middle of the format. This is the bad guy. The bad guy of the format. Every format needs one. And this is the one, man. Abzan is going to remain a top-tier strategy for like the next 2 years because Siege Rhino is just the best card. It's the best card in Standard right now, and probably for some time to come. And Rhino and Death Dealer, Anafenza and Wingmate Rock, they all stop aggro so cold, and aggro is definitely a thing in this format, I think we can agree. And all those cards just take over the game against aggro once they resolve. And Rhino feels sort of like an aggro version of Sphinx's Revelation in a lot of ways. It resets your life total. It gets your opponent down a little bit. It gives you a 4/5 body with Trample. And Trample is actually an underrated ability right now because so many tokens are running around in the aggro strategies. It has a good suit of spells at its disposal, probably the best in the format, honestly. It just plays all the good removal spells. It's got access to all of them. You know, it can play Murderous Cut, Hero's Downfall, Abzan Charm, Valorous Stance, and there's really not much else that you even have to name. Those are just all the best. its only weakness of any kind really is the sideboard in a lot of ways. It's just not a very expansive sideboard because the main deck is already so good, honestly, that it doesn't need like a serious game plan, it seems like, in its sideboard. Because its sideboard, it's a little bad post board against control, but post board against aggro, it's even better, honestly. And it's already just ridiculous against aggro. It does struggle a bit against green devotion decks, which we just discussed, and it's does not play too great. It's very close games with control, but it is the deck that shapes the entire metagame right now. So I'm going to give Abzan an outrageous score of 4.75 right this second. Let me know how you feel about that. Blue-black control was sort of thought of as a sleeping giant before Fate Reforged came out, and once it did, it got Crux of Fate and Ugin the Spirit Dragon, and those are all the cards that that really it needed to take off. The pieces kind of fell into place finally, and we've seen the deck do well in a variety of forms. This whole past month, you can add colors to it. It's still blue-black control, no matter what you do, honestly. But there's always the same key aspects, 3 to 4 planeswalkers, 1 to 2 creatures, and the rest spells removal and counter magic, and it's more and more counter magic as time goes on, it seems, is the right recipe. It's not as good as last season's blue-white control that had Sphinx's Revelation and Supreme Verdict and Azorius Charm and was just a perfect classic blue-white control deck. But this one does play more removal and way more counter magic than that deck did. It plays really weak first games against almost everything in the format, but then has very, very good post-sideboard game, which isn't to say that its sideboard is amazing. It's just that it's very specific in a lot of ways. Add removal or add card draw or, add threats, whatever you need, depending on the situation. Which could be said of a lot of sideboards, but control more than any other kind of sideboard strategy. Both main deck and the board, they deal with aggro, obviously. This is all control decks. By packing just a very diverse suit of removal, mass removal, and even counter magic, honestly. And they can stabilize. This one especially can stabilize very well. Its major weakness, though, is its tendency to fail to stabilize. Honestly, it's after a slow start against aggro or after a flooded start. Aggro, this one usually plays 27 or 28 lands, so it tends to get flooded pretty easily. But you need those drops in control. You really do, because you're going to be playing, a bunch of 7, 8 mana cards. Overall, though, this is a great control deck for this format, and I think it's finally here. We've been waiting for it for a while, and I'll give it the same score right now as Abzan, a 4.75. So that's the state of Standard right now. It's February 2015 as we speak. What decks do you guys think maybe I miss? I know Temur Ascendancy, people are talking about green-black Constellation. Mardu is still out there in a lot of places. Right now, Standard feels almost complete, so we'll see what Dragons of Tarkir does to change that, And yeah, speaking of that, by the way, make sure you check out our Dragons of Tarkir speculation video, because there's not long to find out whether I am right or totally stupid looking. We'll see what happens. And, you can totally, if you want to, the best thing to do would be to subscribe. I mean, we're a growing channel, and you could and totally should be a part of that. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you do that? We got lots of great content, that we've already done, and that's coming up. I'm doing this with my thumbs. And, yeah, again, I'm Dev from SBMTG. I appreciate you guys coming for this, man. Let me know in the comments how you feel. Like, share, comment, subscribe, do all the things, and I'll see you guys next time.